This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
I was in the Southwest teaching history at the University of New Mexico when the questions began. What did I think about Billy the Kid? Was he an evil villain or a warm companion? Had I read about him or seen a movie in which he was featured? Even my students were posing the questions. It took a while for me to realize that Senor Billy was the most written-about New Mexican and challenged Jesse James and General George Armstrong Custer as the leading attention-getter of the Old West. And here I was, a specialist in the history of the American West. It took a while, too, for me to realize that the Southwest, especially Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, like the Northern Rockies and the Western Great Plains, had experienced a Wild West different from the frontier of my native Pacific Northwest. The far west of the Pacific Coast states certainly was also part of the frontier movement, but it had not hosted dramatic, controversial characters such as Billy the Kid, Wild Bill Hickok, Wyatt Earp, and Calamity Jane, or even charismatic native heroes such as Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Chief Joseph, and Geronimo. Billy the Kid and his legends lived in a romantic Old West I had to become acquainted with. In the 1980s, I began researching and writing on Billy. That work led to several published essays, the introduction to a reprint of Walter Noble Burns's dramatic biography, The Saga of Billy the Kid, 1926, and parts of 2 other books. Then I got sidetracked on several other projects, including books on the recent American West, 2 volumes on Calamity Jane, a book entitled Ernest Haycox and the West, 2017, and a volume entitled Presidents Who Shaped the American West, 2018, co-authored with Glenda Riley. But Billy lurked in the stables and corrals. A few years ago, I decided that rather than do a large volume on Abraham Lincoln and the American West, I would undertake a long-delayed book on Billy the Kid. Soon, the project ballooned into 2 volumes. This biography would be the first. Billy the Kid, A Reader's Guide, would be the second. Endless days of examining manuscript collections, reading all the major books and essays on Billy, perusing newspaper stories, and viewing the major films on the Kid followed. The Old West of Billy the Kid was being resurrected. I have 2 specific purposes in mind for this volume. Part 1 provides a brief and balanced biographical account of Billy the Kid. Part 2 traces the interpretations of Billy, including multiple legends, that have taken root, sprouted, flowered, and matured in the nearly 140 years since his death in 1881. Although many accounts have been more sympathetic to than negative about Billy, this treatment in both sections avoids taking sides. I attempt to portray instead what I call a bifurcated Billy, part villain and part generous companion. This book summarizes the major twists and turns of Billy the Kid's life and surveys the flood of interpretations about him, stressing a few topics that previous biographers have underemphasized or overlooked. For example, the following pages deal explicitly with key women in Billy's life, including his mother, Catherine McCarty Antrim, Susan McSween, and the señoritas and señoras who played important roles in his life. The same is true for Mexican or Hispanic heritage peoples. Most residents in Lincoln County during Billy's years there were Hispanics or Mexicans, as they were then called by Anglos or whites. This book examines their clear contributions to the life and times of Billy the Kid. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, at the end of the biographical section, a brief overview chapter addresses the large significant question, who and what was Billy the Kid? This chapter is purposely placed after the biographical section as something of a summation of Part 1 of this volume. But I also place the pen portrait of Billy before the second section on popular and historical interpretations to aid readers in comprehending how the myths that congregated around his life after his death both followed facts and widely diverged from them.